What I've been asked to cover today is the PureSystems and the impact of this on the market. I want to step back first and look at things like what the market conditions are. As I travel around Europe, Middle East, Africa, I see a lot of customer sets, and to give some feedback on that. Fundamentally, in most of the region, we are going through an economic crisis. And that's very interesting in one sense. It's causing people to think radically and differently. And I sort of think of this like the environment is changing, right? And people, especially in a crisis situation, are asking now, how can I do more with less? And crisis situations are very important because a change in the environment results in evolution. Charles Darwin spotted that out, and it was an amazing theory because it says, hey, when the environment keeps changing, things have to evolve to survive. So it's not surprising that in this time period we're seeing lots of innovation. You're seeing it in the cell phone market, you're seeing products, iPad-type systems, etc. So in a time of great change, you see great innovation. Now, what are companies struggling with? What is the dynamic as you go to see customers and see the problems they're having with their IT infrastructure? And you get this classic view of the world, and you see this from many, many manufacturers. And you get this idea that in the past, their computing was done in a siloed fashion. And don't get me wrong, this technology, using silos works, okay? But the cost could be high. So to reduce the cost of infrastructure, people start looking at things like sharing, server consolidation, things like that. Yeah, consolidation of technology. And primarily what you're doing is increasing the level of sharing. So if you share your infrastructure with more people or share common components, then the cost comes down. So that's a good idea. Then with this, people started looking, that led to ideas like virtualization. Now virtualization is very interesting because it is the first technology that broke the link between software and hardware. And this adds a completely new dimension. Now what you used to think was a server is a file, okay? What you used to think was a network switch, that's more of a capacity in which a virtual network exists, right? So this was a very interesting point and a big change. Now in the mainframe mid-range world, this happened many years ago. In the x86 world, this is kind of new stuff, right? This then led to the idea as well, if I've broken that link, I could start looking at things like clouds, where, hey, this could be, some of my technology could be inside my organization, private to me, then I could use public spaces, right? And I could sort of swap between, and that sounds very interesting. Now this is, you see this every day with all your email systems you're using at home, etc., right? So very interesting ideas. The question you've got to ask yourself is, where am I as a company? How do I make this journey, right? And the reality is a lot of manufacturers will always say, oh, we're here, right? That's where you want to get to, the nirvana. The reality is a lot of customers, some are here, some are quite happy here, etc. And then you've got to ask yourself, what stops you from doing this? That's an interesting point, because we know this technology exists and works, right? Well, what stops you could be that this is a technology statement, but most organizations are still organized in siloed fashion. I have a network department. I have a storage department. I have a software department. Okay? So if you want to think here and operate here, maybe organizationally we have to think differently as well. Okay? Now, what's the crux of this whole story? And when you look at this picture, you suddenly start looking at, realizing, and asking some basic questions. Why do you virtualize? Why do you consolidate? Why do you build clouds? Right? Simple question. I mean, a cloud is, in itself is, it's a cloud. But there's something else. Why do you do it? The why you do it is really, at the end of the day, above all of this, applications. So ultimately, you do all of this to get to applications, right? And because the applications is the heartbeat of the business. That could encapsulate business processes, ways of working, etc. So really, what you're talking about here is how can I get to application as fast as possible? So the way I like to look at it is how do you get from an idea to an application? Right? And really, that's what PureSystems is all about. It's about getting from a line of business guy having an idea to being able to have an application running as quickly as possible. Right? In some ways, you could look at it as from idea to application or idea to money. Yeah? Because it's when the application is running, that's when it's actually generating revenue. All the time in between, it's costing you money. When we were looking at PureSystems, we were looking at what's in the market, what are the types of technologies, because Picasso once said this. He said, good artists copy, great artists steal. Right? So what could we steal from? What could we copy from? And if you look at the industry, there are kind of three technologies that are in the market, very well tried and tested, and we could be using. One is standard data center type technology, right? That is classic infrastructure. Could be rack mount servers, could be mid-range, could be mainframe type systems. Very secure, very flexible, but can be cumbersome. Can be very time consuming to get machines into a data center, to wire them up to the way you want to wire them up. So that is advantages and disadvantages. The second option is clouds. Now we know from the success of internet and computing and applications on the internet, these are fantastic. Very flexible, very elastic. Problems may be sometimes with security, especially when you're looking at private cloud or public clouds, right? But definitely there is some logic in there when you're seeing companies being able to support 500,000 or 500 million users on their data centers. There's something they're doing in here that we might like to use. The third element is appliances. They have some fantastic attributes. So with an appliance, I mean, you've got the application, the middleware, bolted right onto the hardware, optimized, etc. So they're fantastic for getting a deployment in very quickly. So if you want to get to an application very quickly, an appliance is very good. Partially, I think, because it sort of sidesteps everything. It works, around some of the organizational problems. The negatives of an appliance is it can be a one-trick pony, right? It does this thing very, very efficiently, but what happens if you want to do something else? Yeah. What happens 2 years later, right, when that hardware is out of date, right? Suddenly this thing I bought isn't as fresh as it was. So again, but you've got to take the positives and the negatives of each of these and then try, and that's what we've tried to do with PureSystems, is to look at the positives and see if we can build something that is radically different, right? And the idea of PureSystems is really, as I said, I presented it once to an analyst, and he came up with, I think, a very interesting statement. He said it's a catalyst for transformation. We decided to also take into consideration one other thing that is happening in the market. The other thing is convergence. You're seeing, with virtualization, with servers being virtualized, storage being virtualized, and networks being virtualized, there's a possibility to bring them all together and encapsulate them in one integrated system. Okay? So if we can do that, and then build something that covers these three spaces, we could be onto something special. So the idea is, what is in an appliance, right? And let's go from there. So traditionally in an appliance, you would have hardware. You would have an OS hypervisor or an hypervisor layer. That could be a cloud, could be termed a cloud management layer. Then on top of that, you would run middleware, and on top of that, the app. Okay? Then embedded into this would be the smarts, the wiring it up in a sophisticated way, right? So embedded in here would be the skills, yeah, the knowledge, etc., of wiring this stuff and matching it up very, very efficiently. So what we've done with the PureSystems is we've built something like this. Yeah? So it can, in one sense, do this, the work of this. But as we said, there are limitations of appliances. How do we keep them fresh? How do we address the other flexibilities that are possible with clouds and data centers? So as well as doing this system we call Pure Application System, we offer it also unbundled, right? Now this is very interesting because this now allows a customer who says, look, I like your stuff very much, but I don't like this part of the middleware stack. We use a different stack, right? So I want to build my own. Yeah? Then we've taken it even one step further than that, because one of the key messages we've had back from the market is openness, right? That we need to be able to support Linux, we need to support Microsoft, we need to support AIX, we need to support all different flavors of hardware technology, etc. So as well as doing that, we've taken it one step further, whereby you could just use the hardware components and build everything yourself. Okay? So this is your IBM Pure application. This is, we called Flex, Pure Flex system. Yeah? And this is the built-to-order building block based around the Flex system chassis. Okay? So what we're doing, and this is what is really unique in the market, we're offering a choice, right? Now if I'm a customer, I could choose in some instances to use this. In some instances where I have my own middleware and my own way of doing things, I could use this. And for general purpose, stuff that is like what I call classic infrastructure, I could build it all myself, right? That is, I think, a huge advantage. Now there's something missing, isn't there? What about these skills, right? And this was a big challenge for us. It's true. What are these skills? What is all of this? Yeah? Don't I lose it when I go here and here, etc.? Now, what we did here was to realize that we have a lot of expertise in IBM, not just in the development of machines, but in our software teams for how to wire up the middleware, but even more important than that, our industry teams working with customers in specific industries. So we've built up a wealth of knowledge. So what we've done with PureSystems is encapsulate that skill in what we call patterns. So these patterns are basically knowledge relevant to deploying applications. Quite complex ones, not just one server, but it could be a range of servers, a range of virtual machines, all doing different things. These patterns are stored on a website. So these patterns can be used to optimize this machine in a specific way. So you're not locking this machine to be a specific appliance. You have the flexibility of using different patterns, right, as and when you need. Now, that's all very nice story here, but what happens, can we go a stage further? The reason we did it this way is we're playing in a market where there's so many different vendors, so much choice. And the key thing here with this model of working was we realized, hey, these patterns could be from IBM, but they could be from ISVs as well. Okay? So if I'm a software vendor, I am a small software vendor, I have an application for a trading application, for example. I can put my patterns onto IBM's site and use that, and customers can access it to modify stacks, right? And this suddenly becomes very, very interesting. Because what you're talking about here, in another way of looking at it, could be a thing like an app store, right? Because the applications sit here, I want a specific application, I want a set of skill, right? Or set of way of tuning it, so I download the patterns that I need. So this is, I think, one of the most exciting parts of the PureSystem announcement. You could also take this another step. The tooling for building these patterns, right, and these images, is available so that even customers could build their own patterns. Because large organizations may have a whole set of applications which they've built in-house, right? So suddenly they could be building their own little app store. How does this fit for business partners and resellers? Now here is the focus here is to determine where you want to sell, right? What we've done is broken this up so that if you want to focus on the application, you may think of starting with a stack like this. If you feel that, no, my business is more about wiring my own middleware and the application services, you may start with the Flex system. Or if you feel, no, I want to do the whole thing, right, then the Flex centers would be a far better starting point. The Flex system chassis would be a starting point, right? So this could be viewed as opportunity spaces, right? And depending on your skill level, you choose where to work. Now, some people say, oh, you talk about getting an application up and running in minutes, etc. The reality is, to get this up to here can be done very quickly. But sometimes wiring from here to here can be quite complex because you have to move customer data, etc. That could take a long, long period of time. By having this stack built, right, it basically means you can spend your time on the application. And that is the real focus of these system designs, is to start saying, look, the real value to a business is in the application. So why not try to encapsulate the infrastructure, which in many cases companies are spending far too much time on, and to focus their efforts on the applications, because they affect productivity of users inside an organization. Doing this, we decided that one of the key components and one of the key elements was you've got to make sure that your building block, the core building block which you're building this from, has to be solid, bulletproof. So what we did with the system, and as I said, I come from a hardware background, so I'm very proud of the machine. What we did with the base unit is, I think, a big step. Normally, when you made a server, you built a motherboard, you put it into a chassis, and when a software house came and tested it, they said, okay, we're compatible with that server. But that statement was primarily just compatibility, right? And the reason they could only give that statement was because they didn't know what storage was going to be attached. They didn't know what networking was going to be attached. So separate from that compatibility statement, in white papers and red books, they held information: what happens if I used EMC, what happens if I used IBM, etc. What we've done here is slightly different. Inside the chassis, we have put in the servers, the processors, the networking, and the storage. All of it integrated. Okay? So what you have is not a part of the story or a part of a data center, but you actually have, and one way of looking at it is like the DNA of a data center. Okay? So now when you're putting your application and targeting this, you are actually targeting all the different systems that you would normally target in a data center. So your application can start exploiting some of the features and using technologies that are hidden in there. I'll give you a very simple example. For the storage side of things, we used a virtualization technology that's been inside IBM for a while called SVC, which then moved on to the V7000 product. Now in that storage technology, there's a little feature. It's called easy tiering. Now easy tiering is a very smart little application, because what it does is it moves more frequently used data to faster disks. Right? So if an application starts hitting the disks, it starts getting better performance because of the easy tier function. So this is a very simple example, but if I take an app and run it on this machine, it might go 25% faster, simply because this is there. Yeah? Now, in the past, how would I have done that? Yeah, could I have done that with V7000? Yes, you could have. But it would have mean wiring this in, doing this yourself, etc. Okay? Here, it's automatic. It's built into the system. Right? So this gives you an example of how you can sort of benefit from features within the system, right? And benefit and use the technology that's in there because it's a known target entity. Another way of looking at this is here, what you're looking at is infrastructure as a service. Okay? Over here, what you're looking is software as a service, and with the tooling above it, it could be business process as a service, right? So you can look in this PureSystems not just as hardware and software, but as a part of service-oriented architecture. Okay? The simple message I wanted to give with PureSystems is really three things. Number one, it's about getting to applications quickly, right? And then having, not only getting to them just to install them, but having the skills and best practices available to you in a very easy to use manner, okay? The second thing is the openness of this technology, right? You can choose different processor types here. We chose our virtualization layer for the storage, but off of that you could hang other people's storage. On the networking side, we recommend a set of switches, but you can use other networking components. Yes? So it's the flexibility, and that was what's key in the name of the product, right? That I think makes this machine very radical in the market, or very transformational in this market. And that analysts comment as being a catalyst for transformation, I believe is very true, because for this machine, it's about getting departments that classically were working in silos to work together, okay? Because to get this thing up and running, it's about everybody pulling in one direction, all the different organizations, etc., pulling in one direction. The last thought I want to leave you with is about innovation, right? And it's about the fact that it's a very simple idea, right? Some of the best ideas are just simple. I never forget when I first saw my first iPod. My brother bought it from me from the United States, and it was for my son, and we decided we've got to take it apart before he sees it, just to see what's inside. And we took it apart, and we were kind of shocked, because the LCD panel was common. Seen that on Nokia phones, etc. The micro switches, we knew all about those. There was actually a physical drive in there. Well, that was made by IBM Tosh, I think, right? But what it was to package existing working technology in a very easy to use way, okay? Because even if you looked at iTunes, well, I've seen websites like that before. So what we're doing with this machine, with PureSystems, is to package stuff that we know works very, very well, right? Bring it all together in a very easy to use way. And one real big dimension, or one big sort of left field idea in it, is we're also packaging in IBM know-how, right? Not only IBM know-how, but ISV know-how, and even customer know-how through these patents.